let's dive into it. I have a controversial and ignorant question for the panelists, and maybe we start with you, Guy. This is for both of you. So I've never been to Saudi. It's my first time here. And I have to admit, prior to coming 72 hours ago, Saudi was not on a list of destinations that I had in the next few years to visit as a tourist. I have to say the past 72 hours has been eye-opening to me, and the two factors that stand out the most is, number one, the hospitable nature of the people I've come across. I had no idea how naturally hospitable Saudis are. Number two is the frontline hospitality workforce, how they work with pride and how their natural hospitable nature actually works to their advantage in welcoming tourists. And I have to say that I will definitely come back here as a tourist again with my family after the past 72 hours. There is a gap in the Western world, a lot of the credit going to the mainstream media about what Saudi is all about when it comes to tourism. And I'm talking about US right now and some parts of Europe. The average US citizen or some Europeans don't think of Saudi as a tourist destination, or at least not a top 10 destination on their list of places to visit. So my question to you, Guy, is what can we do as hospitality industry professionals to make that image of Saudi as a tourist destination more accurate and change the minds of ignorant people like myself who rely on mainstream media for inspiration for places to visit? What can you do as the CEO and president of Rotana? And then I would love to ask Abdulsalam the same question as a Saudi citizen.
Yeah, interesting question. You know, I've been traveling in and out of the kingdom like on a regular basis for the last 15 years, and even now, every time I come, even this visit, I'm surprised at the pace of change. You know, so the speed at which the kingdom has evolved is just phenomenal. You know, and the quality of what is being built into the kingdom in terms of tourism and the quality of experience is just it's fluid, it's constantly evolving. So for me, you know, the main thing we can do is support communication and continue to drive that experience. And you're seeing an enormous amount of very high quality communication. You're seeing what's happening now, particularly the Tourism Authority here, what they're doing in terms of their presence in global tourism and trade shows, what they're doing in terms of marketing, what they're doing in terms of communication, what they're doing in terms of even just placing advertising. I mean, if you watch CNN, I guess it's hard to miss the message about Visit Saudi. You know, through the World Cup, through events like that, you saw a lot of communication around the experience in Saudi Arabia. So that communication platform is really important, and we're very engaged in that. We make sure that our own marketing, our own messaging dovetails with that we continue to reinforce that message that doesn't just come from the Tourism Authority, but people also see that message, that endorsement being repeated, being reinforced through the private sector. So there's many channels that they can trust, you know, social media, our own social media, our own share of experience, and you give those multiple touch points where people are seeing a message which is not just coming through an official tourism agency, but is being endorsed and reinforced through the private sector. I think that's important. There's no replacement for experience. You know, so bringing as many people into the market to really see it firsthand. So we're bringing in as many as we can, airlines, travel agents, fam trips. We're bringing as many people as we can, corporate buyers, come and see, feel the market, and then leave as an ambassador. You know, so all of these touch points are really important. So that communications space, critical, and then reinforcing that experience, because there's no replacement for the experience that you've just had, and I have every time that I come here, that it just opens your eyes.
Perfect. Abdulsalam.
All right. First, I'm pleased to be here with this amazing gentleman and the audience. Second is what we're actually doing today in Sea Ventures itself. And as Saudi citizen is delivering a message to the world of who we are and what are the things that we're doing and what we believe in. And we're just being literally who we are. In terms of our role as Sea Ventures or the sister companies and the things that we do have global businesses and outreach. And within that, we tend to promote Saudi and the hospitality as we do as well. And one thing that Saudis, as you mentioned, is known about, my partner Salman used to say, or still says, that we have the hospitality in our DNA. It's not something that we studied in the books or we read in a magazine. And the funny story that always happens that you will find in each Saudi family member, whenever they were at age of 8 or 10, they would be the host at the house to host guests and so on. Maintaining this and delivering and sharing these experiences and stories with the world is what we are actually doing, and we can do much more, especially to the West and so on. And in addition to that, I think the government is doing great work in terms of events, global events, sports events, concerts, and so on. So mostly, if you look at the numbers comparably to what we were before and what we have visitors in millions today, and that didn't exist 2 years ago. And that all goes to the same message that we're just being who we are, and we're showing the world what Saudi is actually all about.
100% agreed, and being as ignorant as I am and being from the US, at least for the past 30 years, I was going to say that maybe making a Hollywood film in Saudi would go a long way in helping US citizens at least visit Saudi, but I think your answers are a lot more sophisticated than mine. Guy, this one is for you. If you can talk a little bit about Rotana's expansion ambitions in KSA over the next 5 to 7 years. And as part of that answer, I would love to know, for somebody who's leading a major hotel group, which factors do you think are playing the most significant role in Rotana's ambitions in KSA? A combination of, I would say, government contributions, private investors, and obviously natural growing demand. Between the three of those, what is the biggest factor that excites you about your expansion plans in KSA?
All right. That's the whole, I guess, subject of this conference, right? That's why we're all here. But, there's no doubt that the kingdom right now offers one of the fastest growing hospitality platforms in the world, and it's still, I guess, one of the countries that is probably most undiscovered, which gives this amazing scope for people to come and experience a deep, rich culture for the first time. So that's a unique opportunity. It doesn't come along very often. So for us, we have multiple brands, and there's a different space for each of those. So when you talk about the metro hubs like Riyadh, we would like to see absolutely a growth across the brands through 5-star. We think there's a gap, particularly in the Riyadh market, with hotel apartments. So I think that 5-star hotel apartment space is a segment which is wholly underserved in the metro centers, and that's something we're focusing on growing. And then we have a mid-market lifestyle brand called Centro, which is something we're actually quite excited about, because on the advice of the Tourism Authority here, we've actually curated a version of this brand which is specific to the kingdom, which is localized to Saudi Arabia in design and food and art, and how that represents. It's unique to the Saudi market, because we think once you get out of those metro centers and the capitals of religious tourism like Mecca, Medina, there is an untapped domestic tourism demand in the kingdom, which needs to be connected with a little bit of infrastructure. So we see that Centro product with massive potential once you get out of those metros, either in a serviced apartment version or in a lifestyle sort of mid-market hotel. So there's huge opportunity in the kingdom. Today, in terms of how we're getting traction under that development, for sure, at this point in time, the private sector is definitely, for us personally, for our group, the private sector has been a very strong supporter of growth and brand, because we're a brand that is we have that sort of investor-centric strategy. So we're very close to developers and investors and owners and how we think and how we grow an asset. So that private sector has switched quite quickly and has been the initial accelerator of growth for us. But for sure, the space, what makes this so different is that strategy, that clear strategy. I think the conversation, the quote which was perfect from last week is that tourism is the new oil. That's a brilliant quote from Tourism Authority, and we're seeing that plan, that structure, and then the influence of TDF, the influence of the Tourism Authority, the Ministry of Tourism. This is going to be a huge engine of growth. So that the initial start is private sector, but absolutely the momentum is coming through public.
I love the fact that private sector is number one contributor to your ambitions. So for you, Abdulsalam, SEA Ventures has an interesting role in the industry here as it relates to tourism. You kind of sit between government, private, and startups. So I would love to hear what your thoughts are. What is SEA's Ventures role in activating and accelerating the tourism industry in the kingdom?
All right. So SEA Ventures is it's a force of change. It's an ecosystem developer. We do work with government, nonprofit, startups, private sector, and other supporters. We tend to build ecosystem by engaging everyone in the process. So we do very good stakeholder engagements in any sector we work on. The last 2 years we worked on the tourism one, and we did great, massive success in terms of accelerating startups and taking them to the next level. So the things we do in terms of that is not only to work hard, such as many different players, to get them investment, but actually to get them sales, to actually work on their growth, expansion, operational excellence. And that's something I tend to be, or say out loud a lot, that what makes us different in the market, locally and globally as well, is when we say acceleration, we really mean in many different terms, not only investments, and investment is only one of it.
Perfect. Sticking with you, Abdulsalam, the kingdom obviously is spending a lot of capital and resources in turning Saudi into a top 5 destination in the next couple of decades for the globe.
Yeah.
Do you think this capital infusion and deployment is hindering entrepreneurship in the kingdom, or is it fueling it? Because from where we sit at Plug and Play, capital can actually hinder entrepreneurship, and relying on capital too much takes away some creativity in the process. But do you think that is the case in the kingdom? And do you think this kind of spending is sustainable in the near term or midterm?
I think the reality, Amir, what is actually happening is not spending, it's investing. So that's the right term to me in terms of what is actually happening. Second thing, the government is investing in the infrastructure that needs to be activated by a private sector. And that's what every government does. Second, all of the money that you see today is going to the right stakeholders, to the private sector, to the operators, to international companies that is coming and investing as well. And if you look at the ecosystem generally, there are many stakeholders that have their own role. And these investments are subject to ROI eventually. So they're not just throwing money away, and it's supposed to be sustainable, because most of the investment that is happening is based on a plan and a vision and clarity.
Thank you. Guy, this one is for you. You shared with me that Rotana went through a digital transformation over the past few years under your leadership. My question to you is, based on the trajectory KSA has when it comes to adding more keys to the kingdom, does KSA have an opportunity to leapfrog other nations in terms of digital transformation? Because in a way, it could be viewed as a semi-clean canvas in utilizing the best of the breed technologies out there. Secondly, can you name some, if any, first of its kind technology deployments in KSA by Rotana that hasn't been deployed across any other countries or regions?
Yeah, sure. I don't think it's a question of can Saudi Arabia leapfrog. I think Saudi Arabia will leapfrog. I think there is a digital awareness, and there's sort of an entrepreneurial expression coming out of young Saudis, which is second to none. And then there's capital and there's investment and there's appetite for the industry in a very structured way. There's no question in my mind that we're going to see innovation and digital and startup and systems coming out of the environment in Saudi Arabia that are going to be game changers and absolutely new platforms for the region and maybe globally. It's a nest. It's a breeding ground for this kind of growth, and it's no question for me that this is coming. And I can see a time where we're going to be taking startups that we discover here in Saudi Arabia and rolling that out across our estate, across the region. So no doubt this is going to be a hub for digital innovation. For our mind, it's really, really clear. There's nowhere else in the world that has that focus, that plan, that structure, and that determination to diversify the economy into a tourism-specific space. And with that environment, it's got to happen. And this is something we're excited about, because the whole point of what we did from a digital transformation perspective was about 5 or 6 years ago, we came to the realization that we don't know anything. and what we actually just need to do is to rebuild our whole IT infrastructure to create the most agile, flexible platform we possibly can, so that when we uncover best-in-class digital enhancements, we can plug and play whatever we see. And I think as a tourism, we're hoteliers. This is not our space of expertise. So having these sort of all-encompassing, large-scale systems which offer you almost no flexibility, no agility, and that come at a very high cost, that wasn't the way of the future. So over the last 5 years, we've broken out of that, and we built this architecture that allows us to now just open the world of digital transformation. And an example I can share with you is, it sounds small, but actually it's substantial. We had a startup which actually came out of the UAE, 2 young guys. They built a platform called Visionize, which digitizes our whole food delivery system in our hotels. We piloted in one property, and now we've rolled out across every hotel in the company. And from a sunbed at the swimming pool to room service, the entire food delivery system in our hotels is digitized through this startup, and cut our delivery times by about 10 to 12%, increased our revenues across the board by 18%. So we're able to plug and play now these amazing digital systems, these amazing innovations, and it's opening a world to us that in the past we just were not able to consider.
Thank you for the plug and play plug. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Just really quickly, I'm looking at the clock. I have a lot more questions for both of you. But Guy, you spent some of your hospitality career in other fast-changing markets like China and India. Would love to see how you compare the evolving tourism industry in KSA to those markets. What are the scale and the speed of change that you see here?
Yeah.
And as a follow-up question to that, again, in 60 seconds or less, you recently announced you're going to be hiring or doubling your workforce in the region by up to 11,000 people in the coming years. Facing the shortage of talent in hospitality, that not just in this part of the world, but across the world, what is your strategy in being able to attain this kind of talent and I guess, training this kind of talent in the next few years?
Okay. So if I deal with the first part first, this is such a dynamic space, and I guess probably the closest example that I would have from my personal experience is China, because China, particularly in terms of hospitality asset perspective, exploded in terms of growth. But I think, honestly, the kingdom is unique, because even in the China experience, there wasn't that concerted vision. I guess what's in common is they had a long-term plan, which had a 20 or 25-year time frame attached to it. But the focus and the structured drive that has come from government, from infrastructure, from private sector, around a 2030 plan to say we need 100 million visitors, tourism arrivals into the kingdom, and this is a clear diversification of the economy away from an oil-based economy. Tourism needs to play a bigger part. To see that connected strategy where all the dots are really, really connected, from government, tourism strategy, evolution, development, planning, I've yet to experience in my career, a holistic conceptual strategy, structured and driven and focused on the same way. So I think this is what sets Saudi Arabia apart at the moment. I've never in my career seen that level of structured planning and commitment to achieve something specific to tourism. So that is definitely unique, and that's going to drive and fuel growth here, I think, like nowhere else. I think when it comes to the human component, the devil is a little bit in the details, and this region doesn't have the same talent problems that are encountered in US and in Europe. We don't have those same issues. The way that the industry was structured in those countries, where people were paid on weekly or bi-weekly paychecks, and COVID hit and 75,000 people were made redundant, in 24 hours, that had a huge impact on the industry. It was a very short-sighted thing to do, and you can see what's happened now. They're paying the price, that people have lost confidence in that industry, particularly in Europe and the US. In this part of the world, we don't have that same challenge. We don't have that same challenge. And there was a different approach taken, and the duration of crisis was shorter, and our businesses rebounded faster. So we don't have, in terms of recruitment, a challenge attracting people to industry. I think Saudi Arabia uniquely has a skill set challenge. So we need to go very quickly in terms of the speed at which the human resource or the human capital component needs to be added, because everybody's here talking about, we're going to sign 50 hotels, we're going to sign 20 hotels. But yes, there are 10,000 people, that, in our case, attached to that story. So there needs to be a strong talent development, a strong training culture around that. And we see that as our responsibility.
Yep.
Our opportunity as a business is that we're going to grow our brand, we're going to grow the value of our company based here. Our responsibility is the other way. Our responsibility is to grow that industry and invest in that industry using our expertise. And hotels around the world, in my career, hotels around the world were always kind of recognized as a hospitality school. So you went to certain cities around the world and you talked about, well, where did you learn your hotel skills? Well, I learned it in that company or in that hotel. And that's the responsibility that hoteliers and hotel operators have. It's not down to the government to deliver to you, here's your 10,000 qualified employees. It's down to the hotel companies. It's our responsibility to have the right learning and development platforms, to grow talent, to promote talent, and to create a hub where we are feeding our business with the right talent.
That was definitely more than 60 seconds. But
Sorry.
Thank you.
Big subject.
But all valid points. And I know time is up. Since Mr. David Jackson took longer than 5 minutes, I'm going to allow ourselves to take an extra 2 minutes. But I want to share his story, personal story that I came across during my visit in the past 72 hours. I was talking to one of the ministers in the tourism industry here, and he said that he recommended to His Highness that the airspace in Saudi is overcrowded, especially for domestic travel, and Saudi needs to invest in a rail project to take advantage of ground transportation for the purposes of tourism. Within 1 month, that project got approved by the Ministry of Transportation, and this is a multi-billion-dollar project. So the speed of decision-making for the right causes, as this guy alluded to, I've never seen anything like it in the world, and I think that is going to definitely work to your advantage in the coming years to turn Saudi into a top 5 destination across the globe. Last but not least, Mr. Abdulsalam, since they're telling us to get off the stage. So a lot of the, I would say, innovation that's coming into the kingdom is either coming from brands like Rotana or international startups like Winnow that want to have a bigger presence in the kingdom. And as you look at innovation evolution, a market like India, for example, it took some time for them to actually become a technology exporter, which they are now. They're actually coming up with startups that could export their technology. How far do you think KSA is from actually churning out unicorns that could actually export their technology and not just serve the local market?
So to answer your question, we have a program, it's called Unicorns. And it has, I think, over 50 high potential startups that will eventually reach to unicorn. As of today, we may have around 10 or 8 to 10 unicorns that existed only in the past few years. And at least 3 of them already happened in the last 3 years or 2 years. In the upcoming next 5 years, you're going to see at least another 10 or more, especially with the support of that program and that ecosystem. The Saudi startups that I'm referring to are not only operating in the kingdom anymore, they're operating in the GCC, Egypt, Africa, and some of them is already scaling to much more markets. As of today, the VCs as well are investing heavily in the right startups, and the investment is not coming only from the Saudi VCs, but actually global ones. Some of them is in US based or China and other places. And this is a great indicator that we're not only investing in our own startups, even the whole world or global companies, notable ones, want to invest in these companies, that is, they can see the high potential of it, of becoming a unicorn. A while back, you used to hear a quote by someone, I forgot his name, but he used to say, if you want to become a billionaire, come to Saudi Arabia for the next 2 years and disappear. And that's how everyone, or all the startups who are actually in the right track, are becoming or building unicorns here because it actually have the right infrastructure. If I just want to add additional part to it, the ecosystem in the kingdom today is as clear as possible. We have a direction of 100 million visits by 2030. We have 1.6 jobs will be created by then. And we have a tourism development fund. That's to fund and enable. We have a Saudi Tourism Authority to promote and enable. And we have a Ministry of Tourism that regulates and enable. So when you see all the infrastructure, all the ecosystem that is being built in the right format, the direction of what's next is coming, you already see the progress since it was announced, the 2030 vision announced until today. And everything is already clear, and some of the objectives is already overachieved. And within such an ecosystem, unicorns are very possible, and it's happening very soon.
Thank you very much. Can't wait to be back here with you guys in Saudi. It's been an eye-opening experience. Thank you to our panelists for sharing some very diverse views on what the tourism industry has in-house for us in Saudi, and looking forward to coming back to you very soon in the near future. Thank you, gentlemen.